Hi there, this is John Wilkinson again from History Made Easier, with a video looking at how we would describe the American War in Vietnam, total or limited. Now, when I looked at the topic of total war with regard to World War I defined total war as encompassing a number of things: the scale of the war and the way in which the war is fought, the use of resources, including men, the degree of government control necessary to continue the fight, even the war aims of the belligerent powers. And I said that if enough of these things lean towards being very much in evidence, then it's reasonable to define the war as being total. Well, for America in Vietnam, they don't. For America, it was a limited conflict with limited objectives, limited to supporting South Vietnam to prevent a communist takeover, rather than seeking the total defeat of North Vietnam through a full-scale invasion and occupation. America didn't invade the North. And though considerable resources were committed to the war, and the American economy was affected, national resources were not fully mobilized for the war effort. Nothing like. Life, as well as the economy, carried on as normal in America. But America did drop twice the tonnage of bombs, 7 million tons, than were dropped by all the Allied powers combined in World War II. And it was obliged to reintroduce conscription, with a total of 2.2 million men conscripted. And America certainly didn't see the war as insignificant. Now, I thought it would be interesting to compare Vietnam with other American wars, and a comparison does show up some interesting points. When we consider the length of the wars and the numbers of men involved, we can see that though Vietnam certainly scarred the American psyche, the numbers aren't that high. In World War I, though troops first saw combat 12 months before the end of the war, they were only involved in major combat in the last 6 months. Nevertheless, 4.8 million men enlisted, of whom 2.8 million were conscripted. Looking at the casualty figures of those who died, some 53,000 actually died in battle, but more died from the 1918 flu pandemic. We see much higher figures for World War II, when America was in the war from a much earlier stage and fought in the Pacific as well as in Europe. What's also interesting to note is the number of civilian casualties in World War II. Only small in number, but until the war with terror, they are the only civilian casualties of any note. You'll see the numbers are lower for the Korean War compared with Vietnam. But in fact, given that it was a much shorter war, the numbers are in fact relatively high. The numbers in Vietnam at any one time peaked in the years of 1968 and 1969. With 536,100 in 1968 and 543,482 in 1969. And it's important to note that though more than 2 million young men were drafted, only 648,500 served in Vietnam. So that about 2/3 of soldiers in Vietnam were volunteers, and 1/3 were draftees, with draftees making up about 25% of combat forces. America spent a lot of money on the Vietnam War, approximately $135 billion, about $1 trillion in today's money. broken down into about 111 billion for military costs, 16 billion for military aid, and 7 billion for economic aid. Nevertheless, in the peak year of 1968, this was only 2.3% of GDP, when today, with America not fighting a war, it's spending 3.4% of GDP. And as you can see, the 2.3% is lower than in all its other wars, considerably so, compared to World War I and World War II. But it did affect President Johnson's domestic programme, his Great Society, which aimed to eliminate poverty, reduce racial injustice, and improve education and healthcare. A bitter outcome, and particularly when those it would have helped the most were conscripted in greater numbers than the wealthier parts of society. So, not total war, but limited war as far as America is concerned. Even though it threw its young men and its best technology into the war effort. I hope this proves useful to you, and I will do a similar presentation focused on the Vietnamese. Now don't forget there's my website, History Made Easier, that's there to help you too. Check it out if you haven't already. But for now, let me thank you so much for listening and wish you the very best of luck with your studies. Cheers.